All right. Merry Christmas, everybody. Happy New Year. Happy Kwanzaa. Happy Hanukkah. Happy Festivus. And any other holiday that all of you wonderful people celebrate this time of year. Be safe, be merry, have fun, and make sure to give the receipts to the person for whom you give the gifts. All right. We are here for Cowboys Overtime on StarTelegram.com. I am Fort Worth Star Telegram columnist Mac Engel. He is Mr. Dallas Cowboys himself, Nick Harris. Nick, before we proceed, the first question I have to ask is, what the hell are you wearing?
It's feeling festive today. No, it's kind of like your grandmother's quilt, except a lot more comfier. I'm getting compliments on it, Mac. I don't need your approval.
I saw that, and I was like, God, what in the hell is that thing? Is he wearing a blanket,
Yeah.
or is it a blanket or something you grabbed off the couch, or what is it? Does
No,
it have
no,
sleeves?
it's got sleeves. See, it's even got a little cuff on the sleeve. It's nice and comfy, nice and cozy.
Well, the funny thing is with your headset and that coat and the black and your beard, it could be like, I can't figure out what that is, whether it's like a Dion, kind of necklace thing, and you got like a
I see.
medallion underneath the shot, or it's a wireless headset, or it's the cut and the sweater. Like, you've got a lot of things going on right now, and I've got to say, you're killing it. This is 11 out of 10 as far as I'm concerned. As former Cowboys coach Jason Garrett would say, off the charts.
Just Nick Harris in the flesh. I'm being me today.
All right, we are on Friday, and this is the time of year, and I don't know about you, Nick. This is the time of year where time and days lose all meaning. I don't know what day it is. I don't know what time it is. Because football games are on 36 hours a day. We're in the middle of bowl season. I know you're very excited about TCU's appearance in the New Mexico Bowl. Can't get tickets to that game. We've got the college football playoffs coming up. Before we talk about any of that, Nick, we got ourselves a playoff team. The Dallas Cowboys right now arguably are the best team in the NFL with a 6-8 record, and went into a place that nobody wins on Sunday, and that is Charlotte, North Carolina, where the Cowboys knocked off the mighty Carolina Panthers in a blowout. The Cowboys now are 6-8. Break up this team. We're looking at a dynasty. We're looking at a new set of triplets. Basically, Cooper Rush is Troy Aikman. CeeDee Lamb is Michael Irvin, and Rico Dowdle is Emmitt Smith. Cowboys have 3 games remaining beginning on Sunday night against Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. All right, baby. I'm guessing you've got the Cowboys going 3-0 to finish up the regular season to springboard and launch into a run for the Super Bowl title, correct?
Yeah, not quite. I think. I think. Well, where do we want to start? We want to start with the Carolina game or this Tampa Bay matchup?
Tampa Bay's down the list. So, and I know I'm being a wise ass and all that other stuff. There are a couple parts here to this team. Yeah, well, I just want to make sure I threw out that disclaimer. By the way, before I forget, thank you, Window Nation, for sponsoring this. I know it's the top of the screen, but I want to make sure I say that. There are a lot of components to this team that, even though the record isn't pretty, that look pretty good. Brock Hoffman, it looks like they have found, even though they haven't found anybody at receiver, and there are questions all over the place, especially in the back end of this defense. That game against Carolina was pretty good because it does show to me they have developed some pieces throughout this mess that could be valuable assets for this team in 2025 and 26. So what did you see from that game against Carolina that made you think there's some parts to this that, looking forward specifically to 25, could be components to a decent team?
I mean, yeah, we heard a lot of rhetoric early in the season from the Joneses or even Mike McCarthy talking about how all of these young players getting these reps, getting these snaps will eventually pay off. Mm-hmm. Whereas, like, from the fan perspective, going into this season, that shouldn't have been the plan. But there are still pros in that. They are right. There are still pros in that. And you're starting to see some of those pros pay off. You could look at a guy like Rico Dowdle. He's not necessarily a young guy. It's his 5th year in the league, but this is his first real opportunity to be able to play. I know he was used sparingly a year ago, but now he's finally getting this full opportunity, and you're starting to see what reps carries, attempts have done for him. 3 straight games where he set his career high in rushing yards, and then he does it again in his home state of Carolina, just about 95 miles from his home in Asheville. And then you look at a guy like Brock Hoffman, like you said, his 3rd year in the league and taking over for Zach Martin a couple of games ago. Whenever that happened, if this had happened a year ago, we would have had a lot of concern about that. Be like, okay, an undrafted guy has only barely made the roster for a couple of years, but now he's starting to pick up some starts. What is this going to look like? And Brock Hoffman has done nothing but inspire confidence, and he's been phenomenal. He's held it down in pass protection. He's held it down in the run blocking situation as well. Even in the game in Carolina where he needed to step in at center and have TJ Bass play at right guard, it was seamless. He was able to go in the middle of that offense, handle the declarations from the center position, and pretty much do what he needed to help that team run the ball and help them win that game. But you could look on the defensive side. Maris Leofau finally getting an opportunity now with DeMarvion Overshown going down. He has a forced fumble. He has a sack. He has a phenomenal game up in Carolina. You're starting to see the youth on this team really pay off.
Okay, I was hoping you were going to say his name because I can't say his name. The defensive lineman, the interior defensive lineman, Usa. I can't say his last name. Yes, he looked good, and he looks like a guy who will be a player, but he's going to be a free agent. We have seen time and time again this team lets a certain tier of free agent go. Now, they didn't with Leighton Vander Esch, and obviously Leighton unfortunately had to retire, but when Leighton Vander Esch was up and they had not exercised the 5th year of his rookie option, he came back on a 2-year deal with the idea, I know the Cowboys did not think he was going to stay healthy, and ultimately he didn't, but he got another year. He got a deal. He got a 2-year deal. He got a year of it, and he did get some money, which is good for him, but ultimately his neck injuries did prevent him from fulfilling the end of not only his contract, but the way that career should have ended and evolved. Now with this guy, Osa, that's a really good young player in a position where they're a little thin. Well, he's up. He's going to get paid. Nick, will the Cowboys pay him?
I think of the defensive free agents that are upcoming, you got Osa Digizua, you got Chauncey Golston, Jordan Lewis, Eric Kendricks, Carl Lawson. I think Osa Digizua, if you can only pay one, he might be the guy you pay, just because the Cowboys have had so many struggles in the interior defensive line over the course of the last few years, going back to when McCarthy first walked in the building. And now they are finally getting a consistent pass rush out of the 3-tech position. And since week 9, he leads all interior defensive linemen in the NFL for quarterback pressures. For the entire season, he's 4th among interior defensive linemen for quarterback pressures. He is getting to the quarterback. Yes, he's undersized at 280 pounds. Yes, you're going to still need to draft somebody to help in run support in situations. He's improved in the run game. Don't let me lead you away. But I think the pass rush and what he brings in that department, it's worth bringing back, especially considering the issues that they dealt with at that position. But you look at the rest of the defense: Jordan Lewis, Chauncey Golston, Carl Lawson, Eric Kendricks. There's a case to be made for all those guys to get brought back, but you can't bring it back. You can't bring back all of them. We were talking to Michael Parsons yesterday in the locker room, being like, hey, have you kind of looked at it and seen that it's probably the last time you'll be able to play with Chauncey Golston and Osa Digizua? And he said he was devastated that that's a fact. And he's like, I know that we can't bring them all back, and it's going to be tough. So a lot of hard decisions are going to have to be made about this from this front office, about this defense going into the offseason.
Well, considering the way we have seen good role players for this team be allowed to leave over the last couple of years, especially last season, and it's one of the reasons why this team is where it is. There weren't great players, but they were good players for this team. And one of the big reasons why they finished 12-5 three straight years. And you and I could go down the list of guys that they let go for whatever reason. The one that springs to mind is Dorrance Armstrong, who was a nice rotation defensive end that Dan Quinn took basically with him to Washington. And when I look at the guys that you just mentioned, whom should we prepare as Cowboys fans and observers, Nick, that we should start thinking, he's gone, he's gone, he's gone?
Yeah, probably Chauncey Golston, I would have to imagine. He's starting to play to a higher price tag than I think the Cowboys might be willing to pay him. I think you could also be looking at Jordan Lewis. I mean, the way he has played this year, I'm curious to see what type of Pro Bowl / All-Pro consideration he gets. He's been one of the best consistent nickel corners in the entire league this year. He doesn't have the turnovers or the interceptions to really account for it, but when you look on tape and you see what he has done against slot weapons throughout this season. He's been phenomenal. I mean, you can look at the Carolina game. There was a pass over the middle to Adam Thielen that he jumped in front of, batted it, and it batted off of Thielen's back plate and into the hands of Eric Kendricks, led to a turnover. But I'm curious to see what his price tag looks like next year. It is certainly not going to be the minimum one-year deal that he got a year ago to come back to Dallas. He's only played with Dallas, so I'm curious maybe if that factors into it a little bit. But I think you're starting to see the price tag for a lot of these guys creep up just a little bit. Carl Lawson's case might be a little bit interesting. He was coming off of injury, so they got him for a cheap deal coming into this year. They didn't even know if he wanted to be on the active roster, how they wanted that to be able to get figured out. Not only was on the active roster, he's been a phenomenal pass rush option for this team. He had a freaky sack on Bryce Young in Carolina last week. How does that factor into it all? There's only so much money to go around, but yeah. I think playing into the front office's hands is the fact that Micah Parsons yesterday in the locker room, he has a huge contract extension on the docket ready to be signed and negotiated this offseason. He said he wants to get it done sooner than later so that they can figure out what to do with those free agents. So if they can get this Parsons contract done before March 14th, that'll give them a lot more flexibility in this conversation.
There's one player I don't think we talked about it last week because I don't think this decision was made until after you and I talked here on Cowboys Overtime, and that's as it relates to the now very serious future and injury status of Trayvon Diggs. He obviously is out for the season, didn't go to Carolina. The knee injury is, I guess, new-ish. He suffered a torn ACL right at the start, basically, of the start of the 2023 season. He comes back. It looks like he was getting better. And now the way Stephen Jones was talking, it sounds to me, and I'm just reading the tea leaves, it sounds to me like this is a very serious injury. Do you anticipate at all that they will just cut him?
Hey, can I get medical with you here for a minute, Mac?
Well, because I was going to say this sounded like microfracture stuff. And microfracture is very, very serious. Because, I mean, all of them are serious. I don't care. Surgery is serious for anybody. Yeah. Having had surgery, it's serious for anybody. But for that particular position, I'm like, oh, that's not good. So, yes, go medical on me.
So he had been dealing with a lot of fluid buildup in his knee over the course of the year. That's why he was popping up on the injury report with knee issues week after week. Going into that game against Atlanta, they needed to work him up and ramp him up to get him ready to play in that game. It was because of the fluid that he had been dealing with. Now, in the Bengals game, something happened at some point to where he felt something in that knee didn't quite sit right with him. He ended up finishing the game. They had it looked at during the week leading into Carolina. And what it revealed is that he's dealing with a chondral injury. And what that is where the tendon connects to the bone. It's where there's an issue right there. And there's a break or there's a tear. And so that they have to go in and basically do like a graft surgery to be able to mend that, and the recovery process for that takes about 8 to 10 months. And we're looking at a situation where it would be unlikely for him to even go to training camp, and I would say unlikely for him to start the season. I think best case scenario, he is ready for week 1. I think realistic scenario, you might not get him back until week 7 next year.
But you think he's going to be on the team? You don't think that there's a scenario where they just cut him?
And I think that's a conversation that they're going to have, right? I mean, you look at it and you look at the amount of money that they would have freed up if they did let him go with a post-June 1 release. There's some things you could work with there. I mean, they are in a situation now to where they're going to have to draft a corner and draft a corner probably in the first couple of days to be able to justify to be able to justify if they do let Diggs go, because they need somebody on the opposite side of DeRon Bland to be able to work with him in the secondary. So it's going to be one of the many decisions that this front office is going to have to make, but I wouldn't rule it out. I mean, this is we're now dealing with 2 injuries right after that contract was signed last August. It's tough to justify bringing him back off of that.
Okay, so we have to now jump into the topic that is, I would say, the biggest conversation for the Dallas Cowboys for the remainder of the season, and that is the status of head coach Mike McCarthy. Obviously, Bill Belichick being hired by the University of North Carolina does dramatically change the potential pool of candidates the Cowboys would have interviewed. But it does sound to me, whether Belichick or his agent kicked the tires on NFL potential openings, and the answer was there are no openings. You might want to go to college. So not only is Belichick going back to college, but it should help his girlfriend get into the University of North Carolina. All right, I'm going to give you some numbers. 81-48 .593 winning percentage, 1-3 in the playoffs. 85-67, .559 winning percentage, and 2-3 in the playoffs. The first one is Mike McCarthy's record as the head coach of the Cowboys. The second one is Jason Garrett's record as the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. Now, obviously, Garrett had a little bit longer to coach this team than McCarthy has, but Garrett kept getting, I guess, time. He got a big extension in there too, but time. There are a lot of similarities between these two eras of Cowboys football, a lot. Where are you today? Well, first of all, do you think Mike McCarthy has been an upgrade over Jason Garrett?
I do, yes. I think that's probably the easiest answer there. The regular season success has been sustained. That wasn't necessarily the case for Jason Garrett. And now, granted, Mike McCarthy was brought in to bring playoff success to Dallas. That hasn't quite happened. But if we're looking at the product and what it has been over the course of these 5 seasons, I would have to say McCarthy's been an upgrade for sure.
Yeah, I agree. And I was one of the few. I was a fan of Jason Garrett. And the reason is it's a similar reason why I'm a fan of Mike McCarthy, which is since those guys and I covered Wade Phillips, and I think there was probably some PTSD from that. And even though Wade is a really nice man, the way the Cowboys have operated and functioned has been like a professional team. And I give Jason Garrett a lot of credit for that. I give Mike McCarthy a lot of credit for that. But obviously, you mentioned it, the playoff success hasn't been there. In his 2 seasons where the Cowboys didn't finish 12-5, and obviously they're not going to go 12-5 now, he didn't have access to his starting quarterback throughout the whole season. In fact, for the vast majority of it, he did not. So all that being said, what would you sort of put the chances of McCarthy coming back as the head coach with a new contract next season?
I would look at it right now as a pure 50-50 situation. I'm seeing it where these last 3 games have a lot to determine in that area, because if they finish 6-11, it looks a lot different than if they finish 9-8 or anywhere in between, especially given that the obstacles and hurdles that McCarthy has had to deal with this year. Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones have already communicated that I think they're more than understanding, maybe too understanding of some of those hurdles that have come across for not only McCarthy, but for Mike Zimmer as well. And I'm curious how much that they do factor into that conversation when it is had. This is just my personal take. Whether they finish 9-8 or 6-11, I think what the Joneses are going to do, they're going to take a couple weeks. They're going to field the crowd. They're going to see what they have, and they're going to look at the situation and be like, do any of these guys feel better or look better than the guy we have right now? And if that answer is no, I think they bring him back for a 2 to 3 year contract, and it's basically a year-by-year situation at that point.
I think you're right. All right, we're going to tap into one more topic before we go to break, and that is we talked about this a little bit there at the top, which is the existence of Rico Dowdle. Now, he's not a young kid anymore. He's not a 21-year-old player, but this is his first real shot at being a starting running back in the NFL. And really, since they decided to go to Rico over Ezekiel Elliott as RB1, Rico's been really good. And I think, though I can't remember the stretch of games, but there's a stretch of games where he is the second most productive running back in the NFL behind only Saquon Barkley of the Eagles, which is ridiculous to think about considering the challenges that exist for this Cowboys offense, that they've got a player who's been that productive. So with that in your pocket, with Rico in your pocket, does that change the Cowboys' priorities on the first 2 days of the NFL draft?
I will throw at this with the caveat that I think it already should have been understood going into this stretch for Rico Dowdle that this is a really good running back class in the draft. They can get their guy on day 3. I feel like they could get 2 guys on day 3 and feel okay with that.
You think they could go into round 5 and round 6 and find somebody who would be just as effective or maybe even as a complement to Rico?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that should have been the mindset, I think, before even this 3-week stretch, just because this is not a deep draft class at all. You have the running backs and you have corners that are pretty deep. But aside from that, all the positions, you better get them in the first couple of days if you want to get them. I think with the running back class, I mean, you look at a guy like Bucky Irving, who we're going to see on Sunday night here at AT&T Stadium. He was a 4th-round pick. He's leading all rookies in rushing this year. I believe it's at 851 yards. Don't quote me on that. But you look at the rookies that have performed. Isaac Garindo, he was another day 3 pick. Tyrone Tracy for the Giants, he was another day 3 pick. You can get your guy on day 3. Now, with the way Rico has been playing, you should even more want to plant the flag on getting a guy on day 3. You look at Jordan James out of Oregon. He's starting to get 4th-round love. I think that would be a perfect place. I think that would be a perfect fit in Dallas. Damian Martinez at Miami. He's kind of a power back. If you want more of an elusive back, then maybe you go Cam Scatabo out of Arizona State. He's got kind of that little scat to him that I think you could get in the 5th or 6th round. There's going to be options there on day 3, but Rico Dowdle's play has given this front office a lot of flexibility at that position. I just hope it doesn't give them too much confidence, maybe like false confidence.
Yeah.
Because they have to draft a running back this time around. They can't justify not doing it for the 2nd draft class in a row. They still need to go get somebody, but I think Rico Dowdle has proved that he can be the starter.
All right, that's good stuff. We've got more to talk about here on Cowboys Overtime, but first, let's hear from our great friends at Window Nation.
Window Nation, the star of window replacement and proud partner of the Dallas Cowboys, can help you fill the house this season with savings. Buy 2 windows, get 2 free, and make no interest payments for 60 months, 5 full years. Fill your house for a customized authentic Dallas Cowboys jersey while supplies last. You could even help fill the Cowboys house and win tickets to a game. Visit windownation.com/Cowboys now for details. Call 866-95-NATION. Window Nation, proud partner of the Dallas Cowboys.
All right, thank you very much, Window Nation. Back here on Cowboys Overtime, StarTelegram.com. I'm Mac Engel. He's Nick Harris. All right, the Dallas Cowboys on Sunday night will host Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So I wanted to bring this up to you. I like having this discussion. I had a hard time having it with your predecessor, Clarence Hill, because Clarence would get all animated and tell me I'm wrong and I'm stupid and all that other stuff. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a backstory on this, Nick, so just hear me out.
I got you.
When Baker Mayfield was a senior at the University of Oklahoma, they were playing TCU in the Big 12 championship game. And at the time, I was tasked the responsibility of writing 2 different columns right when the game was over. And I had already written about Oklahoma beating TCU like a drum, which had happened 3 weeks prior to that one. They had met in the regular season, and Oklahoma ran what was Gary Patterson's last really good TCU team completely out of Norman. Baker was great. Oklahoma wins. 3 weeks later, they meet in the Big 12 championship game. Baker's great, and they run TCU right out of AT&T Stadium. So I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to write? I'm like, oh, okay, I got an idea. And one of them was Baker Mayfield is going to be an NFL bust. And here was my logic. Because we all knew that he was going to win the Heisman Trophy. And if you look at it historically, the Heisman Trophy winner, especially if they're a quarterback, goes on to be a bust in the NFL, right? So Baker sees it on Twitter and likes it. And then all of Oklahoma Nation sees it and lights me up. Just got roasted for it. And somebody says to me, you would never say that to his face. I'm like, that's a good point. I think I will. So I went to he won the Davey O'Brien Award. And as you and I both know, Baker Mayfield, his junior and especially his senior year, he was spectacular.
Yeah.
Lincoln Riley should send that guy a check every day. Anyways, so at the time, at the Davey O'Brien Award, they would allow local media to have basically a glorified one-on-one with the Davey O'Brien Award winner. So, Nick, there's like 3 of us in the room. And he's a great guy. He's just really, really well-spoken. He's charming. He's bright. He's good. So at the very end of the interview, I introduced myself. And I said, I'm that guy. And he knew it. He knew who I was, or at least knew me by that column that I had written. And he gives me a very respectful answer, and he kind of puts me in my place. So my respect for him went from here to just Mars for how well he dealt with me. But as I see and look at his career, this is a really interesting career because he was the first overall pick in 2018. The next pick was Saquon Barkley. After that, Sam Darnold. The 7th pick was Josh Allen. The 32nd pick was Lamar Jackson.
Yeah.
Baker Mayfield now is on his 4th NFL team. He played for the Browns. He played for the Rams. He played for the Panthers. And now he's in his 2nd season with Tampa Bay. He's had 2 winning records in 7 years as a starting quarterback. And right now the Bucs are on track to have a winning record. So this would be his 3rd season with a winning record. Do you think he's a bust?
I think your dog believes Baker Mayfield is a bust.
You hear that? It's every damn time. I can't believe you hear that. That's how good this mic is. This dog is absolutely. This dog would be terrified of anybody who walks through that door. But if you're on the other side of that door, you think I've got Cujo in here. So I apologize.
No. I just wanted to give you hell for it. I don't. If we're looking at him being a number 1 overall pick and the expectations that come with that, you're supposed to win MVPs. You're supposed to deliver Super Bowls. Like that's you being a Heisman winner, a quarterback drafted at number 1 overall. Does that mean he's a bad player? I don't think so. But I think there is justification to the conversation that he is a bust. Because you look at Cleveland, they didn't reap the rewards of having him. They haven't reaped the rewards of having a quarterback in a long time, but they did not reap those rewards. And so
if you're hang on, let me pause you on that one. If you're did Cleveland's best year in 20 years was when he led them to the playoffs, and the Browns really played Kansas City tough in a divisional round game. I think it was a divisional round game in Kansas City. I mean, they played with them. Yeah. And Baker was good. My concern about Baker was mostly a little bit about maturity, but really it was about his size. Well, all these guys are proving those size concerns are not as relevant today as they were 10 years ago, because you can't hit these guys anymore and they can take off and run and all that other stuff. But I mean, would you say that when you look at his time in Cleveland, it really wasn't a reflection on Baker as much as it was on an organization that can't get out of its own way?
And that's fair. I think if you would ask any Browns fans at that moment, you would have said, absolutely, that was the perfect pick we could have made. We couldn't have done any better. But then you look at Josh Allen being picked 7th. Are we so sure that Josh Allen wouldn't have led them to higher heights? I think he maybe would have.
Yeah, and I think this is where the bust thing, I mean, look, he's still in the NFL. Absolutely, I think if you're going to say that the problem is it wasn't, I mean, Josh Allen was a risk.
Yeah.
I remember when he came out, there were a lot of questions about whether or not he could be an accurate passer. Well, that looks ridiculous. Lamar Jackson was an outlier pick, and John Harbaugh and that staff really went on a limb to see if that could work. And obviously, he's the guy who should have been the first overall pick. Yeah. I think if Baker Mayfield was drafted 32nd or 58th or 97th, you would say, well, he's carved out a pretty nice career. Because I think Baker has proven he's a pretty good quarterback. He's pretty good. I wouldn't say he's here, but he's pretty good. He's gotten multiple contracts. He's going to make a ton of money, and he'll have played in the NFL a long time. I think for Baker, the whole bust thing comes down to, well, if you weren't the first overall pick, you wouldn't be a bust.
Yeah.
It was entirely about where you're picked, and that's not on you. Some of this, to me, the bigger reflection of Baker is what the Rams did with him. Rams, pretty good organization. And when they gave up on him as quickly as they did, I thought, okay, maybe something's – and I think what we've seen in Tampa is that he's pretty good for a pretty good team. I don't think anybody thinks Tampa's really a threat. But I would say when you look at Baker, you would say he's pretty good.
Yeah. I'd put him in the top 12 of the NFL right now, which that's a comfortable place to be in. There's a lot of teams that have not even cracked 12 in a really, really long time. Chicago Bears come to mind.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I do wonder if, I mean, obviously the Deshaun Watson thing has been an absolute fiasco for Cleveland. I do wonder how many members of upper management at Cleveland think, man, why did we just give up on him the way we did? And you know what? Maybe Baker wasn't at a time in his life, because I remember when they traded him, the line was, we need to have an adult in the room. So maybe it just wasn't the right time for Baker to be what he is today. I don't know, but clearly, I mean, it's an interesting discussion. And he comes in on Sunday night. Obviously, it's a major significant game for Tampa. They're first place in their division. They're 8-6. They are a 7 or 6.5 point favorite? I wrote that down. I can't even see it. We got the Cowboys got 3 games left. Bucks are 8-6. Philly is 12-2. Washington is 9-5. Do you see the Cowboys winning any of those 3 remaining games?
I think they could probably get Washington in the final week of the season, but it's going to be a real struggle to try to prevent double-digit losses here. I'm looking at this Tampa Bay game. I see a team that is way better than their 8-6 record. In their first 10 games of the season, they only played one team that is not currently in the playoff picture going into Week 16. They faced a gauntlet of teams. They go into their bye week, and since then they've rattled off 4 straight wins. They're getting healthier. Mike Evans is back in the equation. K. Dotton is finding himself in that offense. Bucky Irving is emerging as a number 2/number 1 now running back because they've been starting him. And then Jalen McMillan is kind of thrust into that wide receiver 2 role in the absence of Chris Godwin, and he's been awesome over these last 2 weeks. So I see a team that's putting it together at the perfect time. I think that is not a team you want to see in January. And I think for the Cowboys case, this isn't a team you want to see on Sunday night. I think it's a bad matchup. You look at it defensively, they are 30th in the NFL in pass defense. So there's going to be some opportunities for Cooper Rush in this passing game to get going. Can they take advantage of it? That's going to be my big question. Rico Dowdle, can he get some carries? They've only allowed one 100-yard rusher in the last 8 weeks, and it was to Kareem Hunt all the way back. I believe that was in week 11. So it's a situation where Rico Dowdle, if what they want to do with their offense and what's been the bread and butter of the offense over the course of the last 3 weeks, if they want to take that into this Tampa Bay game, then they need Rico Dowdle to overcome some obstacles against a really good rush defense. Guys like Vita Vea and Kalijah Cansey in that defensive interior, Levante David at the linebacker position. It's a really good run defense. I think it's just a bad matchup for the Cowboys on paper. The Eagles, I think you know how I feel about the Eagles matchup. It's probably not going to be that great, especially in Philadelphia with me and the great Lawrence Dow watching from the press box. And then the very last game of the season, on my birthday, we're going to have a great time here, maybe seeing the Cowboys get one more win out of this season.
So you got the Cowboys right now finishing 7-10, correct?
Yeah, why not? Why not? Give them one.
All right. So I think you're right. I think they're going to score 1 of 3. I can't see that. I can't see any scenario where they beat Philadelphia. Maybe if some crazy things go right against Tampa, I think these teams get on a roll a little bit like Tampa, and sometimes they just step on themselves and they can't really explain it and they lose. Maybe that happens. I think that's best case for the Cowboys on Sunday. And with Washington, I think it's going to entirely depend on where they are and what they need to do going into that final game of the regular season. Okay, last thing we're going to talk about here on Cowboys Overtime is not Dallas Cowboys, but rather the college football playoff invitational, which starts tonight in my home state of Indiana, where the Indiana Hoosiers are playing the Notre Dame Fighting Irish for the right to call Indiana their home state forever. In Notre Dame, football has belonged to Notre Dame in Indiana forever. And now I still can't get over this. Indiana is playing a postseason game against Notre Dame in South Bend. Notre Dame is a 7-point favorite. Okay. Then tomorrow morning, we've got SMU playing at Penn State. Penn State is a 9-point favorite. After that, Clemson is at Texas. Are you going to that game, Nick?
I will be there.
All right. Texas is hosting Clemson. Texas is a 12-point favorite. And then to close out the first round games tomorrow night, Ohio State is hosting Tennessee. The Buckeyes are a 7-point favorite. One of the criticisms of the college football playoff when it was created is that most of the games were blowouts. Ask TCU about that. But most of the games were blowouts. We're now seeing in that the creation of an expansion from 4 teams to 12 teams doesn't really solve the problem, which is the gap in college football. Even though there's parity at the highest level, there are big gaps. These point spreads suggest that there are still significant gaps. Now, we're going to see something weird or unpredictable within these 4 games. Of these 4 games, who do you like to pull off the big upset?
Who's the favorite in the Ohio State-Tennessee game?
Ohio State is favored by 7. I mean, these are all 7 and up point differentials. We need to mention this. Our producer, Candy Bolden, is an SMU Mustang. She will be driving all the way from Fort Worth to State College, which starts at 11. Candy, better get hurried, by the way. That game starts at 11 a.m. tomorrow. So you better get in your car. Right? Run the red lights, baby. You can make it. Of those 4 games, who's the upset?
I'll take Tennessee just because their offense can be really explosive.
Can you imagine if they win that game?
Ryan Day's fired. There's no way he survives that.
He won't make it to the tarmac.
There's no way he survives that. No, they'll take him to the tarmac. Somebody in Columbus. But I wouldn't discount Indiana, though. I think, especially with it being in the home state, I really like what Kurt Cignetti has done to that program this year. I think they might just be a couple of years behind. I think he's going to have to build that for a couple more years before they can contend with the Ohio States of the world. But I think they have a chance to go into South Bend and do what Northern Illinois did earlier this year. The fighting
absolutely.
Huskies.
It's the only loss they had all season.
Crazy.
And, I know Texas A&M was kicking themselves for losing to Notre Dame to start the regular season. There's no shame in that. Notre Dame team is pretty good. That coach, Marcus Freeman, has done a great job. I really had that one misread. He's done a great job. What about Clemson and Texas? Obviously, Texas is considered to be a dark horse favorite to win the national title. No one is giving Clemson a chance, even though they have a really good quarterback from the great state of Texas. Do you think this is an issue at all for UT?
I think the 12-point spread is wild. I would be taking those points in Clemson's favor. I don't see a situation where Clemson gets blown out in this game. I think Texas wins, but when I look at the playoff picture as a whole from the Longhorns' perspective, they go as far as Quinn Ewers goes. And I think if he plays at his best, they can win the national championship. But if he plays to the level, if he played the first time against Georgia or even the second time against Georgia and some other times at points this season, they could get bounced in the first round. This is a team that I think has a wide range of possibilities going into this playoff matchup, and I think it all hinges on Quinn Ewers.
So three scenarios for Quinn Ewers. Does he, A, return to Texas? Does he, B, transfer to another school and play an additional season of college football? Or C, does he skip it all and decide to go into the NFL draft?
I think he'll end up going into the draft. I'd be surprised if he doesn't. However, there are a lot of teams that are shaky on Quinn Ewers. He needs to have a really good playoff run to silence some doubters. He needs to have a good combine, good pro day, all of that. I think right now, you would maybe see him go in the second or third round, but he could play his way into the back end of the first.
I think the smartest thing for him to do would be to leave Texas, go to a Big Ten school for a big check and play for one more season and prove that he can stay healthy. But if he does not think he can do it, and you got 3 years of evidence to say that good health is a struggle for you.
5, going back to his South Lake Carroll days.
Yeah, you know what? I forgot about that. You're right.
He has not stayed healthy since his sophomore year of high school.
So at your age, you better go now because you better get it now. And I hate to say that because I do believe he's a good kid. And, bad health, trick, that's just luck sometimes. Do you give SMU any shot at Penn State?
I felt good about those vibes until I saw it was going to be 13 degrees tomorrow. And you know what? Just have fun. Have fun, Stanks.
So I went over to SMU this week. I went over to SMU this week and to talk to Coach Lashley. And, I was asking him about the weather and stuff like that. The day I went over there, it was sunny and 60 degrees. Yeah. And it's supposed to be a wind chill of 11 degrees tomorrow morning. And I'm sorry. And I know SMU played really – if you look at the game, the ACC championship game, and it was cool that night. If you look after the first quarter, SMU dominated that game. I mean, they completely outplayed Clemson, but they got into it too late. And I know their attitude is, well, they have to play in it too. And I'm like, it's different. It's just different. If you grew up in it and you're accustomed to it, 11 degrees just hits a lot different if you're used to what your cold weather is, 60 and sunny.
Yeah, nobody's perfect, right, Mac?
I've read that someplace, especially from Fort Worth, according to the head coach of SMU. Thanks for that. All right, Cowboys host the Buccaneers on Sunday Night Football at 7:30. SMU plays Penn State tomorrow morning. Texas plays Clemson tomorrow afternoon. Nick will be there in Austin. For all of your playoff and Cowboys coverage needs, be sure to check us out on StarTelegram.com. Happy holidays, everybody. Thank you, Window Nation. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Candy. We'll see you next week.